Oh, that was tricky. They added an extra button on hitting record. Um, so welcome everybody. I missed you last week, but I hope that you had a great spring break and were able to take some time, um, enjoy it. We didn't have the greatest weather last week, but today is supposed to be amazing and tomorrow. So hopefully you get to spend some time outside and enjoy the beautiful weather, and that your allergies aren't bothering you too much because allergies are very bad right now. Okay, so our topic today is how to raise an independent, self-confident teen, which I think as a parent, that's our like ultimate goal, right? We want our kids to be independent, self-confident, move out of our house, be able to be functioning adults at some point. Um, I want to put a little caveat on this that if you look at your teenager and you are like, they are not that person. They're never going to move out of my house. I don't know what I'm going to do. I want to reassure you that adolescence is a time where teenagers are filled with self-doubt. They question their body image. They are very insecure. They don't have it all together, and that's okay. It is a very rare teenager that it has it completely together, and you're like, yeah, no problem at all. So if you feel like, oh my gosh, and you're like panicking that my teenager is never going to get to this point, don't worry, it's going to be okay. Because I have a freshman in high school and I very much feel that about him. But then I have my daughter who, yeah, really struggled. And there were times that I was like, oh, I don't know if she's going to be able to do this. And now she is a fully functioning adult. She's renting an apartment. She's like looking, she's got a career plan. She's got it all together. So they do figure it out. Um, I have some strategies that I pulled from an article that we're going to talk about. But before I get into that, Yvonne, I wanted to give you a chance if you had anything to like add as an intro to this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of fun to be a parent who has a functioning adult now, and then also a couple of them that you're like, what on earth is going to happen? How is this all going to play out? And it gives me solace to think that, okay, my first one, there was no way that I thought he would be able to go on and like be independent. And so, this topic has me reflecting a lot on how I've parented them differently. I think I super coddle my baby, and my first one, my middle one seems to be like the most independent, and he's the one that probably got less of me, being super involved because I was with the little one, or um but I think a lot of it, I think naturally it's just going to like work itself out and they figure it out, right? But a lot of it, there's a lot of moves I think I could have made differently where I just didn't give my kids enough credit that they could do certain things. So I think I would maybe step in too soon and do things for them and not really give them the ability to build confidence and make mistakes. And I think that's a really big part of teenagers becoming independent is allowing them to try. Like my husband still reminds me, like, remember when the kids took the bus and you were so mad and you were all freaked out, and now they take the light rail to the Niners games and they're fine because they had that experience. But remember, we were fighting and you were crying because you said they were too little. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, I do. And I'm so glad that they're doing what they do now. And it was scary for me as a mom to allow them to do certain things. But I think in hindsight, I'm like, yeah, I probably could have let up just a little bit.
Yeah, and so how these two topics are connected, independence and self-confidence is, really like starting with the confidence that teens who have confidence, I'm reading a quote, are better prepared to handle peer pressure, navigate challenging dating relationships, make good decisions, recover from setbacks. And so that kind of like having that confidence is what's going to lead them to that independence that we want, because I don't think any of us really want them to be, in their late 20s and still very dependent on us as parents. At that point, we want them to be living their own life and doing their own thing.
And I think part of this topic too is there's been a few times over the last few years where I almost feel like I've been rendered useless. Like my kids are independent, they can go get their own food and do things. And that was a really hard transition for me. So I'm wondering if there were maybe some instances where I could have or should have let go a little more, but didn't want to give that up for myself. We have kids for 18 years, I mean forever, but we focus on them for so long that that becomes part of who we are, that becomes part of our identity. So I think in letting go of some of these things and giving them the ability to be independent, there's a lot of stuff going on for us too as parents, and that is another component of this. This is really difficult.
So that's a tip that I've got in this article. So I'm gonna get to that. By the way, this article is from Very Well Family. It's actually it's a website that I tend to pull a lot of articles when I'm doing research for these topics. I have no idea what this website is all about. I'm hoping it's not something that's shady. Um,
I was
it
the same from the same place. I like it.
it looks like it's good. It's got, they've got high quality sources that they use. So I think it's legit. So I just want to put that out there as a caveat that like this is where I'm pulling this from. Okay, so their first tip is, so what I'll say what it is and I'll like explain a little bit about it and then we can talk about it. So it's promoting self-improvement. And what they say is with our teens, there's a healthy balance between self-acceptance. And so kind of accepting like where they're at and what their limitations are, and self-improvement in wanting to improve. And so as parents, it's suggesting that we help them identify their strengths as well as their weaknesses, and then help them with goal setting and problem solving. And so this made me think about the school-wide lesson that we did in January, which I had sent out to the parents about goal setting. That kind of falls in line with this, that like helping our kids identify a goal and helping them work towards that goal. And it certainly, I think well, for my part, being a high school principal, I tend to think of academics, as a goal and like how, maybe they want to get a better grade in a class or something like that. But it also, I think, could be a personal goal. Maybe they want to make more friends. Maybe, it could be any number of things that they have for themselves. Um, Yvonne, in the work that you do, how have you helped kids or talked to kids about goal setting?
Hmm. I think, because when we talk about goal setting, like you said, we're talking academics, we're talking about how do I be a better child to my mom who's really stressed right now, or how do I, be a better friend to people, things like that are things that I've worked on with students. And I think it's about, one, acknowledging what it is that needs to change and making it like manageable. Like a goal isn't like I'm going to be the perfect daughter for my mom. It's like, no, I'm going to do like, so it's very specific, right? Like I'm going to do one or two things this week that make my mom feel valued and, um like I'm helping her or whatnot. And so I just think it's very specific. It's easy to get caught up when you're goal setting into like doing 100 different things. And that's when you lose track and really don't focus on the goals. And so I always tell them, like, I want you to find something very specific. And I want to discuss like the specific baby steps that you're going to do to work towards that goal and not overwhelm yourself. Make sure it's doable, make sure it's manageable, make sure it's sustainable,
Yeah,
and then checking back in with them the following week to make sure that they have some accountability and that they're following through with their things. But like you said, it could be anything, and a
yeah,
lot of times it's about relationships.
for sure. And then the next tip I have kind of like goes along with this last one about promote self-improvement. And so the next tip is to praise effort instead of outcomes, because sometimes with these goals they don't achieve them. And that can be devastating. And so focusing on the effort they put towards them or the effort they're putting towards school rather than the outcome is a really great thing to do for our teenagers. And it's something that's easy to slip into praising the outcome. They get an A in this class or they get an A on the test and you're like, great job. And like you're like what you're doing is you're focusing on the outcome as opposed to I saw how hard you worked in studying for that, and I was really proud of how hard you worked and like not focusing on the outcome. I think when there is a positive outcome, it's so easy for us to slip into that and like, hey, really great job. And then when they don't get the outcome they wanted, they're scared of the disappointment that they're gonna have, and like that fear of failure, all of that.
I
Along
think that is the one of the single most important strategies for our kids is like praising the effort. Because I have one kid who school was so easy for him. He put zero effort in, probably didn't learn a whole lot. Things were just easy. He just like regurgitated material. And it was like, oh my gosh, yay, you got an A. And then I have one that's worked his tail off, sacrificed playing video games to like get stuff done and, gets a B. And it's like, the effort that I saw him put, the push that I saw him, do was like so much more significant than the one who it just came so easy for. So it's like all our kids are different, obviously. And it's like, you really want to acknowledge that. And there was some research about this, and I can't remember exactly what the specifics were, but like basically, when you're only praising outcome, it's almost like kiddos learn to like cut corners to get to the outcome, and they're not even really truly learning the material. They're just getting to the outcome. And so it was like connected to like more expanded thinking and problem solving and things like that, to actually focus on the effort. And I know I'm guilty as a parent to be like, yay A, yay A. And it's like, that is easy for kiddo number one, but number three is maybe not not in the
so,
same boat, but it's really trying.
as part of like my real job when I'm not just giving parents parenting advice, oh, you can't even see it. I just finished reading this book. Well, it's all blurry. It's The New Classroom Instruction That Works, and it's about teaching strategies. And like that was in what you just talked about, where kids are cutting corners because they're like cramming for the test to memorize it so that they get the good grade, but then they haven't actually learned the material. And when you ask them about the topic 2 weeks later, they don't remember anything. And so like really what this book is about is how to not do that so that the students are actually learning, because that's what we want them to learn the material and not just get the good grades. But yeah, it's kind of that same idea that if you're only focused on the outcome and not the journey and, the effort and like what you did to get there, then you're completely missing the point.
Yeah. And one of the things I always talk to with students and parents alike is, there are so many things that make up our kids, their personalities, their likes, their passions, their friendships, all these things. And it's like literally in the car on the way home from school, I'm like, how'd you do on that test? And it just invalidates those other 15 parts of them, or hundreds of parts of them. And by talking about effort, it's like you're actually asking questions about how they feel and how they push themselves and what drives them and all these things that we're missing when we just are slapping on that like pat on the back for an A.
So, and I think like that what you just said, like, how'd you do in that test? Like, let's like rephrase that, because like your kid had a big test. You want to ask them about it. You don't want to ignore that they had the test. They probably have been worried about it. So instead of asking like, how'd you do, ask, how did you feel going in? Did you feel prepared? Had you studied? Like, do you feel good about the work that you did to get ready for this test? And so that takes away from the outcome, but kind of asks like, do you feel, and then like going back to the self-improvement, if they were like, you know what, I didn't feel prepared for it. I didn't, and like, so then problem solve and help them about, okay, you didn't feel prepared this time. Let's figure out like how you studied and like what you did to prepare so that the next time you feel better about it. And so that's how you can flip that around. And then if they say like, oh, I feel great, like I feel like I was totally prepared, I'm really proud of you. You really worked for that. And I'm really, no matter the outcome, I'm really proud of the work that you did.
Or
So
maybe they felt really prepared and then bombed the test. And then that opens up the door of like, they're not going to be afraid to tell you they bombed it. They're going to be like, hey, what can we do differently? What do you think went wrong? Like opening those conversations. Because if you're only praising A's and they don't get one, you're not going to be the person they talk to about it.
yeah, for
Then
sure.
I've got tons of kiddos who are like, please don't talk to my mom about my grades right now. I'm like, she could log in and see them, right? And he's like, ah. So Being able to tell your parent that you fail is not something that a lot of kids can do. And that's on
Mhm.
us as parents. Like, how do we accept failure? We don't accept it as a lesson for them. Sometimes we accept it as a failure. So we got to be careful.
Okay, so this next tip is, and this one's interesting, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it, Yvonne. Teach assertiveness skills. So teens need to know how to speak up for themselves in an appropriate manner. And this could be asking for help when they don't understand schoolwork. It also, when they're assertive, means that they're less likely to be taken advantage of and be treated poorly by their peers. It's important to teach the difference between being assertive and being aggressive. Assertive means standing up for themselves and using a strong and confident voice without being rude or yelling at other people. And so this, is like kind of going along with the idea of like reinforcing that they have rights and that they are standing up for themselves and that they say no to anything that makes them feel uncomfortable. So I don't know. I'm curious to see what you have to say, Yvonne, about this with a lot of our students. I definitely feel like they need some assertiveness. I don't feel like many of our students are aggressive. I feel like they're like on the opposite end, we're passive. They're not saying anything at all, and like they're just bottling it all up. And so certainly we don't want them to be aggressive. Like that's a negative trait. But being assertive is a very positive, self-confident trait, and teaching them how to speak up for themselves and to
Mm-hmm.
say like how they feel and protect themselves by using their voice is something that's really important but super hard for a lot of our kids.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I would say probably not until my 40s did I feel comfortable being assertive. And I think there's this confusion between being like you can't be nice and be assertive at the same time. And that's not actually true. It's like a funny story. So a bunch of social workers went to this, it was like this adrenaline response self-defense course. And one of the things you had to do was be very assertive, like, no, get away from me, back up. And the social workers were terrible. Like we all would be assaulted in the parking lot. Like we were like, oh my gosh, sorry, sir, you're making me uncomfortable. Like we were just not assertive at all. And one of the things the guy said that stood out to me, he's like, you all in this group would feel more comfortable being hurt than hurting someone else's feelings. That's not okay. And we're like, oh my gosh, you're totally right. Like, yeah, like you can say what you need in a way that's straightforward. And it's almost like you have to teach people that you're valuable enough that you deserve to protect yourself. And that was something that took me forever to learn. You're totally right when you talk about our kids being very timid. And I think it even connects a little bit to that praising the outcome, right? It's like, I don't want to ask too many questions in class. And then my teacher thinks that I'm not smart and I look weak in front of my counterparts and all these things. And it's like, when we talk about assertiveness, it's like I'm asking for what I want. And, as an adult now, I can say, like, I can't expect people to read my mind about what I want. I have to tell them directly. And that is something that is just not an easy thing to do, especially for people who tend to be nice and not want to hurt people's feelings and things like that.
Yeah.
Virginia.
Yeah, go ahead, Virginia.
Sorry,
She's on
trying to
mute.
lower my hand and unmute at the same time. So just from a parent's experience, I feel two things. It is kind of confusing for our teens, especially because we tell them respect your authority, respect your elder, respect the adult, right? The adult must be right. So a lot of times I find that they're like, well, I didn't want to say anything because they must be right. I'm just a child or I'm just the student, right? So it's very confusing in that perspective. And then I do have a very assertive child who um, may seem like he likes to argue, but he always makes really valid points. And it becomes a struggle because then the teacher, when he does present something or be like, look at this is what's going on, or this is why, or they feel like, oh, he just, outdid me kind of thing. And it becomes kind of a conflict because then it goes back to you're the student, I'm the teacher, or I'm the adult, and I shouldn't be wrong. So this is really tough. Like we do really teach our students to do that. And I have actually had to go into a classroom with my son and a teacher and mediate between both of them because he is correct. Like, and I'm not just because it's my son, right? I want to hear the facts too. I want to hear what his points are. And and I had to tell the teacher, like, what's the problem here? Just because he's the student doesn't mean he's always going to be wrong. Like, just hear him out. So I find it very hard, for, I guess, just in general, for society to accept, for us to really teach. I had one teacher actually tell me, well, I didn't believe that he was really, being this way, being assertive, being truthful about it. Why? Because he's one of few that may be that type of person, but they do exist. So it's really hard for society in general to really accept that. And then for us to teach our children to respect, our authority, our elders, our, other people. So I just wanted to share that from my experience.
Yeah, I love that. I had a similar experience with my middle in middle school. And he I don't know if he challenged the teacher, he asked her something and she was wrong. And it turned into this really awful dynamic. And so when you're being assertive, it's like um it can come off to people who, like you said, adults sometimes are not used to that, especially when you're growing up in this, like, or working in this society where the kids are super timid, as challenging or insubordinate, or, and so it's like finding that balance of like, you can respect your elders and have an opinion, but sometimes that might not work for that person, and go into it expecting that, like, how can I do this in a way that's going to feel like, we're on the same page still, but I still have an opinion. And that's a tough one, because it does come off like, I was like,
Absolutely.
I'm telling you,
I think this is
stupid.
actually I think this is good advice, but it's difficult. And it's not an easy thing to do. I think, the, modeling with your child, and letting them practice on you, and like how, they, like, if they say as the parent, because you tell them to put out the trash or something like that, and they don't like want to, so how do they respond to you, and like modeling, what would be an appropriate way. And it's not always going to work well. I mean, as the principal, as the school, I would hope that all teachers would be open to this, but teachers can be human, and it's not always going to work out. The same way that all of us are someday going to have a boss who's going to do something we don't like, and you're going to stand up for yourself and say it, but then it may not work out. Believe me, I have said things to my bosses and it hasn't always gone over well. And it doesn't always work out the way you want it to, but that's a good life lesson too. But, and I think that, again, going back to praising the effort versus the outcome. You may not get what the outcome you want. Like, you were assertive, you stood up for yourself. You may not get the outcome you want, but you know what? You stood up for yourself. You weren't passive. You didn't bottle it up. You didn't like say just like and ignore it. You pointed out a problem and you defended yourself. And I think that is really the key. It may not and this is one area that you got to like really like, hey, you may not get the outcome you want. It doesn't always work out.
Very true.
Okay, so this is the one, Yvonne, I told you that we were going to talk about, well, this one and another one, encouraging new opportunities. So many teens are afraid of failure and they don't want to embarrass themselves. And so one thing that we need to do as parents is to encourage them to try new things. And it could be in high school, joining a new club. It could be like this summer, getting a part-time job so that they're getting some new experience. It could be, Yvonne, letting them go on the bus. It's, encouraging new opportunities, because that is a good thing for them. And actually, one thing I was just thinking about with the assertiveness, and this goes along with new opportunities, because if you're looking for things to do over the summer, signing your kid up for a self-defense class could be something to help teach assertiveness skills, and you're giving them a new opportunity. I was thinking about that, Yvonne, when you guys were gonna, you're gonna get attacked. Like that we should be teaching our kids self-defense.
I was like, yell, and I'm like, stop. Yeah, I think obviously as a parent, I'm a worry word like a lot. And I think in hindsight, my husband always said this. He's like, I think your own anxiety has instilled fear in our kids. And I have to own that. And it's true. Um, there's like a balance between like regular mom worry and then like putting that onto the kids. And I am guilty of that in many ways. Every single time my kids have done something new or different, they always, I don't know why it surprises me. I'm like, oh my gosh, they did that. That's amazing. Like, I'm terrified of the ocean. I'm terrified of my kids being in the ocean. And my husband's like, we're going to do surf lessons. And I'm like having literally a heart attack the whole time. And they all did wonderfully and they loved it and they felt so empowered. And I'm like, man, I've been blocking that for years. So really creating space for them and believing in them. Like they pull it off every time. And I just like think about how many things I didn't let them do. And so as they're getting even older, there's a lot of things that I think, I could allow them to do. Owen got his permit last week and I haven't even let him touch the car yet. So that's my challenge this weekend to like, well, he's like, oh, I'm ready to drive to McDonald's. I'm like, you've never driven before. Like, we're not going to do that. And then he's like, that's not true. Your mom let me do that. And the grandma, I'm like, oh my God, like, don't even tell me that. But like allowing that because I know that he's going to feel so empowered when he does it. And that's like,
You've got a key to the parking lot. Bring him over to school over the weekend.
there's cameras.
Well, so you're like the Yvonne, you're like the perfect person to bounce this stuff off of. You're like leading me into the next thing. So the next tip is to model self-confidence. Your teen will learn the most about confidence based on what you do, not what you say. So if they see you doubting yourself and, like you were saying, like your own anxieties, that's where they're gonna pick up on that. So if you are somebody that's like critical about the way you look, or you're critical about your abilities, you say like, oh, I'm so stupid. That's the type of thing that they pick up on, and they're going to pick up and they're going to like repeat a lot of those same behaviors. So really that's something to like, as a parent, keep in mind, like the stuff that you say about yourself and the way you project yourself, and model what you want your child to be doing, which, you got to do a little self-reflection on that. So
yes. I always think, I'm like, man, I have such good kids despite all the failures that have come along with raising them and figuring it out. And my hope is that one day my kids look back and they're like, my mom did the best she could with what she knew at the time. That's like best case scenario. That's my hope. But I do think in everything we do, whether it's relationships or health wise or whatever, like modeling that for our kids is just the most important thing.
Well, and again, like because these are all related, but going back to the praising the effort, not the outcome, do that for yourself too. Like if you are interviewing for a new job, and you don't get it, give yourself kudos for like, hey, I put myself out there. I tried, that I tried, I tried to do something new. And that was really good for me. I didn't get the outcome I wanted, but it's okay. I'm proud of myself for doing that. And like actually saying that out loud to your kid is a really great thing to model for them.
What's cute is I just thought of this right now is my kids are actually probably better at this practice than I am. The last week I've been going for walks every day. I kind of go for a hike up in my neighborhood. And, I don't know if the scale is supporting what I'm doing yet. Right. And so for me, I get down on myself like, I should have lost 10 pounds by now. And one of my boys yesterday, he's like, Mom, he's like, you went out for a walk every day this week. He's like, even those days when you wanted to take a nap, you went. He's like, that's a really good job. Like my kid told me that. And here I am like, what'd you get on your test?
That's so sweet.
So him
That's
seeing,
awesome.
and then he probably asked me to buy him something, but whatever, that's besides the point.
What he was doing? He was doing my he was doing my next tip, which is build your self-worth. Your kid was helping you do that. So you want to help your
Yes,
teen,
we are.
you want to help your teens build their self-worth. And so this is especially like, we've talked about the downfalls of social media and like, social media and like caring about how many likes that they get on social media and like how detrimental that can be to their psyche. And so really like with building self-worth, it's helping them see what's really great about themselves when they put effort into something, and they have perseverance or they're very kind, I mean, just like things. I was talking to a staff member who actually usually joins in, she's not today, just this last week, and she was saying, my daughter, who's a teenager, doesn't recognize what she's good at. And so I think that that's true of a lot of teenagers. They have a hard time thinking like, this is something that I'm really good at. Like, and because they like compare, like it's like comparing to other people and like stuff that they see on social media. And so if they aren't getting straight A's or they aren't, in this like amazing internship or something like that, they don't see that they have something to offer. But being kind, being like having a good sense of humor, being resilient, those are like life skills that are going to help them throughout like their whole life. And so pointing out to them, like, this is who you are, and that's amazing.
So
So,
I'm going to do a little therapy that I usually do with my clients, and I'm going to ask you, Ginny,
okay.
when you think about your daughter,
Okay.
what's great about her? What are her strengths?
She is incredibly kind. She is funny. She is empathetic. She is smart, but not like book smart, superficial smart. Like she is somebody that has an intuitive understanding of the world and can critically think and just like make connections and get things.
That's awesome. So, and in the same way, what's great about you?
Oh boy. I knew you were going to ask me that. I was like, oh, she's setting me up.
I know. What's great about you? What do you have to offer this world?
I think that actually a lot of the same characteristics that my daughter has. I do think that I'm a kind person. I do think I have a pretty good sense of humor. I do think that I think I'm smart. um, and but same way, like I am not somebody that got straight A's in school. Never in my life did I get straight A's. But I think I think I'm pretty smart. And I think that I care about people. So
Mm. You did well, and it's so interesting to me always how I can spout off 100 things about my best friend. I can spout off 100 things about my husband, and it's like we want people to have high self-esteem and think great about themselves and really acknowledge all the good things that we have to offer. But it can be uncomfortable. It almost feels like I feel like almost like some guilt if I talk too good about myself, and so being able to model that of like, hey, I've got all these great qualities, and how do you do that without feeling like you're full of yourself, or like it's healthy to acknowledge where you're good at things or what your strengths are, or what you're all about. And it's not natural for us to do that. It's just like, I'm funny, I think, and it's something that I think at a young age, like it's important that we normalize like talking good about ourselves. I always tell people, like, if I talk to myself, like if I talk to my friends the way I talk to myself, I wouldn't have friends. Right? Like I'm really hard on myself and I think I should be this and that, and I'm not. And it's like, no, it's like there are great things about myself. I do the best I can. Like but it's not natural to talk good about ourselves, to think good about ourselves. It's like we're in trying to find that balance between like, how do I push myself to be a better version of me, but also acknowledge the good parts of me.
yeah. So
Um,
this is one
you're
of
a
the
good sport.
thank you. this is one of those places where you can model what you want your child to do. So if you feel like your child's having a hard time, like recognizing what's good about themselves, do what Yvonne just did, flip it on yourself. Like what's like talk like what's good about you and like talk about it and like say it. So, okay, this next one is hard. And this is like, especially with what we talked about 2 weeks ago with like all the scary stuff on the internet, and all of the bad stuff in the world. Balance freedom with guidance. So their advice is micromanaging your teen's choices will only reinforce that they can't be trusted to make good decisions independently. It's important to balance just the right amount of freedom with plenty of guidance. And so really, I think, like we talked about 2 weeks ago, there is scary stuff in the world. And so I think that that's where the guidance comes in, that you teach them and you like are aware of who their friends are, you're aware of what they're doing, but you can't be micromanaging every little thing. Like I really don't think parents should be reading their teens' texts. I don't like you need to let them have privacy and let them have their own life and like their own little bubble with their friends, that you don't know every single thing, but you know enough that you can guide them. Um, One thing that kind of goes along with this is teens have to experience consequences. So if they say something in their text group to their friends that didn't go over well, or there's consequences to that, that's something that's really important for them to learn. Like, where there's, like we talk, Yvonne and I, Rupert, we see it all the time that there's teen drama, and like always with teenagers, always. But I think that that's actually an important part of being teenagers and an important part of understanding relationships. They have to make mistakes, just like we talk about with like learning and like, I told you I was reading this book about, teaching good teaching strategies. Like something that's really important in the classroom is that students make mistakes and then they learn from those mistakes. That's true for life too. They have to make mistakes in life. They have to, you know, fumble things, with their relationships and learn from that. And so as parents, though, we have to give them enough freedom that they're allowed to do that, and not completely protect them and keep them in that bubble. Yvonne.
It's tempting to, yeah, it's so tempting to do that. But what I always tell parents is like, I want them to fall on their face while they're still living at home with me, and I can help them and catch them and support them. Then if I'm like, snow plowing all the problems out of the way, and then they are 25 years old and something goes horribly wrong, I mean, and they're isolated and they're not with it, like that for me is a bigger worry. And so, and that goes back to the book from last year of like the gift of, was it last year, the gift of failure, or the year before?
Yeah.
And man, I think that I've grown more in my life from the mess ups that I had than anything else.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, man. So I think allowing them to do that, and I was just telling somebody yesterday, I'm like, man, when your kids hurt emotionally, there's nothing worse in the whole world. I would sacrifice anything to not have to watch them go through and experience all that. And on the same side, it's like if they don't experience that, they're not going to grow to their fullest potential and know that they're resilient and capable of a lot of difficult things. And it sucks to watch, but it's definitely better to allow that now. Well, we still have a little bit of input in their lives.
Yeah. For sure. And it is really, really hard to sit back as a parent and watch that, because you do want to, like you were saying, the snowplow and like get rid of all their problems, but you're not, in the long run, you're not helping them. It's when they're 30 and they can't deal with their life, like it'll come back. It's so don't do that.
At 30, they're still doing their laundry. You better be careful.
I look at my in-laws and my father-in-law, who's the kindest, most nicest person in the world. But man, he has fixed all my sister-in-law's problems. And she's in her mid-50s and does not have it together. And he has just fixed all of her problems for her. And it's sad. It really, yeah. So, all right, one last tip. Help promote self-talk or help develop positive self-talk. So kind of like we were talking about, like you were like beating yourself up and you should have lost 10 pounds and your son was like, hey, you walked every day. You didn't want to, you still did it. So like promote, like do that, like have with your teens, if you hear them saying like, nobody likes me, or I'm so dumb, or I'm not going to get this, or not, have them promote like positive self-talk. If you hear it, like stop it, like, and point it out and be like, hey, no, don't say that. Look what you've done. And like point out like all of like, those self-worth things. And so a lot of these are interrelated, but like just having them not dump on themselves is a really great way to get them to become self-confident. Because self-confidence is about, hey, yeah, no, I see my worth. I I know what my value is. And they're not, I mean, yeah, where they might have made a mistake, admitting that you screwed up, but not letting that control everything. Like, okay, yeah, I screwed up, but this is what I'm going to learn from it. Again, focusing on the effort, not the outcome. You screwed up, it's a bad outcome. Okay, what are we going to take from there? Any last words of advice, Yvonne?
Oh, just be gentle with yourself. Nobody gives us a manual about all of this. So obviously we're going to make mistakes. We're going to do our best. But I think like what you just said in the end of like one of the biggest lessons you could ever teach your kiddo is demonstrating that you could admit when you're wrong. I have kids all the time. Like I've never heard my parent apologize, or I've never heard my parent admit they're wrong, even though they were clearly so wrong. Doing that and allowing them to learn from that, I think is huge. But again, all these things tie into one another, and giving them the space to mess up, giving them the encouragement they need. I'm 45 years old and my kid told me, good job, mom, walking. And I'm like, had a pep in my step all day. Imagine what my words to them feel, right? Like how that feels. I was like, oh, I'm getting my tennis shoes on this morning. So, Gavin will validate me again. Like it's meaningful, it's important. And, do a good job of praising the efforts that they do put forth. And they're not perfect and neither are we. So let's encourage the things that they are doing well.
Great. Well, hopefully parents, you guys found this interesting and valuable. I Nobody put any questions in the chat, but we have a couple minutes if you have any questions. While you may be typing. I preview of what's happening next week. I'm not going to be with you next week. I'm going to be on a school visit. I will be at West High School in Tracy, California. But next Tuesday evening is the counselor presentation for juniors about the college application process. So if you have a junior and you are about to embark on the world of college applications, counselors are doing a presentation next Tuesday night over Zoom. And so as always, when they do a presentation, they come to the Zoom of the principal the next day to answer any follow-up questions, because I know what it's like. You sit through these presentations, you think you've got it, and then 2 hours later, you're like, oh, I have a question. And so that's why we do the follow-up where they're not doing the presentation again. But if you have questions that you thought of overnight, they will be there. They will be here with you next week to answer your questions. So that anybody's invited to that. Yeah, anybody's invited that, but specifically it's the targeted for juniors, just so you know, with the college application process, the counselors go to trainings and everything for that year, and like the guidelines and everything for that specific year, because colleges do change things from year to year. And so the information they are going to be presenting is what's going to be true for this year's juniors to be seniors, because they are the next group to start the college application process. But if you are the parent of a freshman or sophomore, you are welcome to attend and welcome to listen in on that, just so you can have a little preview of what's to come, but realize some information might be, it's not gonna be drastically different, but it might be slightly different for when it's your child's time. Okay.
Be there Tuesday and Wednesday for my juniors.
Nice. All right, good. Thank you, Vincent. Awesome. All right. Well, I want all of you to have a wonderful week. Spend some time outdoors today. Go on a walk. Yvonne, have you already done your walk today?
I
Or are you
did
doing
one
so?
at 5. Yeah, I'm gonna do one at lunch.
Okay, because it's supposed to be lovely weather out today, so enjoy that. Enjoy. I love this time of year where it starts getting warm. This is my favorite time of year. So enjoy all that. You guys have a wonderful week. I will miss you next week, but I know you will be in good hands. And then I will see you the following week. Okay. All right. Bye, everybody.